I didn't look this morning. They were
Well,
out
this was
yesterday. They were out the day before.
No, Saturday, Saturday.
Yeah, no, it was still there yesterday.
Up to the bag.
Yeah, I've got pictures of it.
Did you walk up past Topsail?
Never did.
Had a lot of erosion on the other side of the sandbags up towards Topsail. It's the first time I walked up there in a while. It was pretty bad. Some of them, the old pool's exposed.
Yeah, Cameron was out there actually. He was in one of those little boats. They'd asked him to help. They said something about getting a generator on.
Oh, I
They did.
know. But if they're gonna
But if you look at this thing from behind, it's insane.
Thank you. I see him out in the parking lot. Mr. Peters.
All right,
Is he coming?
He's coming.
Yeah.
we're gonna give it 2 minutes for Mr. Peters to come in, Deb.
Movie that somebody.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order the special meeting for, what is today? Monday, January 4th. The whole reason for the meeting is just to, at a high level, review the agenda for Thursday evening and be able to have some question or education surrounding any specific items. So we're ready to be able to vote on Thursday as appropriate and not have that meeting turn into a 10-hour meeting. All right, so there were a few specific items on here, but I wanted to start, first of all, Mr. Gilbride, would you be able to just introduce Sherry to everybody and whoever may be watching as well?
No, I'd like to introduce Sherry Hancock. Sherry will be taking over for Laura Oxley, who served the town well for a number of years and may be the only clerk that any of you have dealt with. I'm not sure. But Sherry is looking forward to, she's a resident of, what is the name of that town?
Swansboro.
And she brings some years of experience to the job. So hopefully we'll work through a few hiccups as we start out, and we look forward to having Sherry with us for a long time.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and I know we've got Fran on here too. So I think most of the reason for my wanting to have the meeting were specific to a couple items that we're going to have to make resolutions on, and also question about the paid parking. Do we have any questions that we need to take up Fran's time for this morning? Anyone?
Can you just give us an update on the,
Well, we're gonna do the update on Thursday, but do you want an update just on the dredging? That's supposed to be, that the dredge
no,
that's
it's
out there?
not on the permit?
On the permit
We can
for,
wait for that Thursday.
yeah, because,
Maybe on the Florence project?
It's on the agenda.
yeah,
It
it's,
is.
it is on the agenda. So we can ask him, Mike, if you'd like an update. So Fran, I think what Mike was asking for was an update on the permit as it relates to, was the Hurricane Florence permit? Mike, is that what you're asking? Yes.
Correct.
Yes, the CAMA, DCM is setting up a interagency meeting that will happen, this month. They haven't gotten back to me. They have to contact Fish and Wildlife Service, Wildlife Resources Commission, all the other ones, and get a meeting together. And they weren't able to do that in late December. So we're having that interagency meeting here in this month.
Any other question? Fran? We're good. And I know that I've seen pictures of the dredge that has arrived to our local area. So hopefully we'll be seeing some sand on the north end of the beach from the ICW.
Yes. Yep. Goodloe Marine has been slow, and they hopefully they don't get chosen again in the future.
Thank you, Fran.
Piper's being put out yesterday. I got a question for Frank. New River Inlet Management EIS timeline is controlled by the USACE. I understand that. Doesn't tell us anything about where it is. What's the status on that timeline? And when was the last time that you spoke to them and got any kind of an update from them?
That is big. The Corps prefers to actually run that through the town, and they don't like to talk to me too much. And I have spoken with Steve Dial about this, and Steve Dial is obviously, he's working for the town, but he's a third-party contractor for the Corps, so he is limited in what he can do as well. I think my recommendation is that the town, the alderman or the mayor, talk with Mickey Sugg directly, and that's the best way that's going to get this thing to move forward. And obviously the town and the aldermen have spoken with Mickey, a couple months ago at a Board of Aldermen meeting.
Right.
And we're still, I'm frustrated with this as well. And the Corps really has no, they can just delay this as long as they like without any kind of, penalty. And it's really, a shame. But I can call them and talk to them, but it's the best way to do it is from the town in my recommendation and in my experience.
I agree with you. My issue is I guess it's the way in which, the fact that this bullet appeared on your slide caused me to come back to you for an answer. And I agree with everything that you've said. And I really think it's probably the manager's in the manager realm of purview to responsibility to do that. You are correct in that we did hear from the Corps of Engineers, but that's been 3 months now. And so, had I not gotten lit up in a local restaurant over the weekend by a constituent over why in the HEQQ this is taking so long, maybe I wouldn't have asked the question, but that's exactly what happened.
When I get that question on a regular basis too, Tom, and the point I wanted to make is I think their whole reasoning for why it wasn't done yet was the public comment hearings.
Yeah.
And Zoom is not going away anytime soon. COVID is still going to be here, so they're going to have to figure that out.
Well, actually, what Mickey Sugg told us when he sat in that chair right there was it would take up to 3 years. That's what he said, but he didn't say why.
There always is 3 years. Every time I ask,
but
it's 3 years.
3 years isn't good enough. 3 years isn't good enough, and it's just a throw an answer against the wall and see if it sticks kind of an answer. And honestly, that it's based on nothing other than we'll tell them 3 years and it'll make them go away. And the fact of the matter is we got people who are concerned. We got people up there who live up there who are concerned, and I'm one of them. And we need to get moving on this. And 3 years is not a detailed enough response.
Well, we're actually 2 years into that 3-year period. In fact,
Yeah.
2 years started back when we had that scoping meeting at the CAMA office in Wilmington.
You're right.
I'm not sure you might have been there.
You two were there, I was there, Dan Timmon was there, Brian Chapman.
Yeah, and, it was delayed a year from then because of personnel problems supposedly in some being able to take on the project. And now we've gotten to the point where, as you recall, last 2 months, I've asked for a timeline from Dow 40 so that we could go to Mickey Suggs and say, look, here's where we are. We're 2 years into this 3-year process, and you haven't even had the general public input meeting, which you're gonna have to figure out with COVID or not, you're gonna have to figure out how to do it.
Right. Well,
And
you're right.
we're still talking about it.
Well, that's why I wanted
We
to
need,
add.
this
some-
month,
So-
our representatives from our town need to go talk to Mickey Suggs.
Well, and I think what we'll do is we'll start with our town manager, and if you'd like to schedule a call day for some of us to attend as with you, that's fine. But I think what we really need to see is their timeline for the project. And they need to start to be held accountable for the milestone. They've got to have a project plan with milestones in it. So that needs to be shared with us. And how have they determined they're gonna move forward with this COVID world that we live in?
Well, I'll just say this, okay, when they wanted something from us, they sat there every month when they wanted something from us. And what they wanted from us was our assurance that we were gonna play in the federal project, that we were gonna participate.
Yeah.
And they wanted us to sign the documentation. Okay, now we need something from them. So maybe in the February meeting, they need to be sitting in those chairs, because I know it's not gonna be probably quickly enough able to be done for Thursday night. But that whole thing works both ways. And so I think it's time for the Corps to come up and not just give us the Rotary Club presentation on PowerPoint, but give us some real answers to some real questions. Because I'm sure, like others, I'm getting tired of getting beat up by people wanting to know what's going on. And the heck of it is, the guy walks away and I'm thinking to myself, he's right.
Mhm.
We're no further ahead than we were 2 years ago.
We're not.
And we should be. And I don't care about Florence, and I don't care about COVID. And I'm not directing this at you, my friend, at all. I'm frustrated with the Corps. And,
My only concern with what you said is I don't think we should wait until February. I think if we have to have a special meeting that's just related to the Corps and this project, let's get them in
Well, I
here.
think we need to start with the conference call and find out when that
I know,
information can be shared with us. And then I agree, let's not wait until February. If we need a special meeting, let's.
Right, because
call a special meeting.
we're all getting pushback from people, not just on all the Corps projects, about
Yeah.
why is it taking so long?
Mhm.
And I think what's lost in this is we don't have control over it.
We have no control.
And so all I'm saying is it's one thing for the town manager to make a phone call,
Mhm.
all right? But to your point, until we got something that says, here's the metrics behind this, and start hitting them with that kind of stuff. I mean, I know I've talked to Mr. Carter about that. We still can't even, in the big project, we still can't get the details of the project.
Mhm.
And yet we're supposed to commit to it. And it's like, to me, I get that they might have other things to do, but those of us that went to that conference, when we had the colonel who's in charge of the whole area, he said, this is the biggest project, never expected it to happen. Everything else, huge project, big deal. And yet we still don't get feedback on it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just supporting what you said, Tom.
Well, I appreciate it. In my previous line of work, we used to have something called a POA&M, Plan of Action and Milestones. It gave you dates.
Yep.
Everybody does.
And I think that I feel like the Corps of Engineers on the EIS at least owes us some level of POA&M.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we can move on.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Sorry to beat you up, Fran, didn't mean to.
I actually think, Fran, you got out with no scars on that one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We'll talk to you Thursday, Fran. You can stay
Okay.
if you want to drop off. That's up to
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Under public presentation and hearings, is there any other questions related to any of this? Ms. Hill, are you going to be ready with the 2 that you have down for Thursday?
I can be.
Okay. Okay.
I won't be on Thursday.
Well, you will be on Thursday. That's fine. Okay, and then I'm just gonna jump down to, under continuing business, which is why the Carters are on the phone today too. So it's my understanding that we'll have to make a resolution as it relates to our plan to go in front of the LGC. And that resolution will include wording related to a tax increase for the municipal service district, because that's really all that's in our specific control as far as knowing how much money can be received in. Is that correct, Mr. Carter?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Doug.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry. Yes, I think you're right. I think, let me just say this to you. The real issue is that by this resolution, you are affirming the agreement you have with them with respect to the USDA. You are saying that you have a new and large project that you're going to undertake with the Corps of Engineers, and that the town board has received a financial plan, reviewed that financial plan. It's multifaceted and has taken votes accepting that financial plan and acknowledging that the town will need additional revenues to fund the core project. I think it's really that simple, and I'd be happy to work with Brian in crafting the resolution, because I don't think you have to repeat a lot of what's in the financial plan. You just have to say that you've seen it, you've reviewed it, you voted on it and adopted it, and then I think that covers us.
So then I have two requests. If we could please, if town staff could please work with you, and also Brian, the board would like to see a draft of that resolution before Thursday, so we're comfortable with the wording. So I would say if we could have that by, I was gonna say Wednesday at 9 a.m. or the end of day Tuesday is fine. That gives us Wednesday to be able to read through it and provide feedback. And then my next question then would be when you say we're also approving to adopt the financial plan. So I know in our chart, which is, big, of all the different financial models, for this meeting on Thursday night, do we have to pick which model we want to move forward with, or is that something we do at budget time?
I believe, Mayor, that the financial plan defines multiple ways to get at the revenue needs.
Right.
And expresses your willingness to move forward in looking at those multiple means. But in the final analysis, one of the alternatives in that financial plans shows no new revenues, and in fact, revenues coming purely from the MSDs. And so I think you're covered by how that plan works.
Okay.
So you're saying option 3.
What I believe he just said, and maybe I misheard him, is that on Thursday night, we don't have to select an option, but we as a board have to be comfortable with this multifaceted financial model that we have. And we have to know going to the LGC that option 3 is the only one that we have control over. Yes, sir.
Just a clarification, and Mr. Carter may be wrong on this. I thought that what we showed is that we had to show new revenues. And so if, without looking at the specific options, that the LGC would look at it, not just at the MSD stuff, and say, well, because we also talked about having a town-wide property tax. Mm-hmm. And I thought what Mr. Carter had said to me is, they're going to look at how much money you can raise. All right. And the only thing we have control over is property taxes. And so if the totality of the property taxes takes care of our obligations, that's all they need. Not, I have to pick this plan, that plan. Because the other thing we don't know is as I think he said to us, occupancy tax increase, they're going to tell us is too big. We don't know if we're going to get it. You haven't shown parking, but all that will be in our plan. And then when we actually go to raise property taxes, which I don't think can be till the end of this fiscal year, all right, then we would take into account those type of things to figure out what we've got. So I thought he was saying you don't have to pick specifically what you want. And I didn't think he said specifically it had to be the MSD paying for everything. I thought it was just total revenue showed that. And if I'm wrong, Mr. Carter, tell me.
I think we have a financial plan that currently shows three alternatives.
That's
Options
great.
inside each of those three alternatives. That is what has been discussed by the board. If we're going to look at other alternatives that might substitute townwide taxes, then I'm up to doing that, but we can't really show them other than what has been reviewed, understood, and essentially voted on by the board.
So I guess, but that goes back to my question, and I'll get to right in a second, Tom. So when you say approved and voted on by the board, so what we're approving and voting on Thursday evening is the financial model that we have as a whole, that we have in front of us, that has been presented and reviewed multiple times.
That is correct. The last.
We're not picking anything.
That's correct. And the last submission was dated December the 8th, I believe. At the time we discussed this, I think that had not been sent out to you guys, but I
Right.
believe subsequently has been.
It
And
has.
Unless we wish to amend that, then that would be the plan that would be referenced by the resolution. And when you pass the resolution, here again, I'm playing a little bit lawyer here, but I believe by passing that resolution, you acknowledge the acceptance of that financial plan.
Okay.
Right, so in the end, to summarize, somebody like me who's not got a degree in all this stuff, and having been out to Raleigh to do this before a couple of times, when we go and plead our case to the LGC is going to want to know specifically what revenue streams we are going to use to repay this loan. Or repay this, well, it is a loan, the loan for our portion of the federal project. Just as though when we went up and did phase 5, we pledged our occupancy taxes. We're going to have to pledge something to pay for this loan. So we're going to have some level of detail within this resolution that speaks to where the money's coming from. Correct?
That is
Yeah.
correct. And
Okay.
that's why the three options with some sub options within on how you disperse or split the MSD as an example. That's why the three options will show a new occupancy tax of 1%, parking as presently estimated, and then taxes. And ultimately in the third option will show none of the first two revenues available, no occupancy tax, no parking. And here's what the tax levies based upon the current estimates of assessed values. Here's what the tax rates would need to be inside the MSDs in order to pay the debt service.
Yeah, I believe what he had mentioned, Alderman Leonard, was that the resolution will reference the multifaceted financial plan that we're being asked to approve as well.
Correct.
At some point, we're going to have to tell these people raising their taxes and by how much.
Right, I'm wondering if we need, is there a benefit to waiting on choosing which one we're doing?
Well,
or
my
is it more beneficial that we know and Doug can go with the actual plan that we're gonna?
Well, my
institute?
understanding is that would all be part of our budget discussions. So that's, the June timeframe when the budget gets adopted.
Well, any way we go, the budget's gonna have whatever amount of money we need.
Well, I understand, but
So-
there's so many other conversations that go around the budget too. I don't think we should just pick out this one thing. And because when we do the budget, we need to look at it as a whole.
I understand that. I understand it affects the whole, but the bottom line of the revenue that we're going to need
Mhm.
is going to be the same, no matter which one we choose. It has to make the payment,
Mhm.
so it has to be a certain amount. So I don't understand the budget to that degree.
But if we are able to move forward with an approval for a 1% occupancy tax increase, then we don't need as much potentially taxes from the municipal service district.
Correct. So that would be a
So-
reason to wait.
Yeah, so I would personally, and certainly it's up to everybody, I would prefer to wait until we know what else we've got coming in than levy a higher tax value than a higher tax than we may need. Yes, sir.
I support that for not just the reasons that you said, but it's things like, which we'll talk about in the other meeting is, are we gonna try to pay off the USDA loan or not? Are we going to, so are we going to, let's just say our friends at the Corps finally come back to us and tell us our share of this thing is not gonna happen for 3 years.
Right.
Are we gonna start collecting all of the taxes today? Are we gonna pay part of the taxes today? Are we gonna step it up? Are we gonna step it back? Until we have a little bit more clarity on that, to your point, I think the message we have to give to the people in the town that's gonna come back from the LGC with Mr. Carter, and whoever goes up there, is gonna be, look, you're gonna have to raise your property taxes. All right, it's going to be a certain amount of money that's gonna have to be raised in those property taxes. All right, but right now, because of the timing of this project and the fact that we don't have to put money out, and we also haven't made a decision. One of the things that I think that we ought to discuss, not today, is we've got that $5 million sitting there in the beach fund. We're paying interest on the USDA loan. We're probably getting almost zero interest on that money. Why are we incurring interest expense? Should we pay off some of that or not? Again, not for today, but all those issues to me are gonna be part of that budget discussion.
The beach in this town, the 11+ miles of beach in this town, phase 5 / the federal project of it is less than a third of it.
Great.
That's something we need to keep in mind when we talk about taxes, when we talk about the fact that this is the second project in 5 years and why we're not, we're spending, I think it's all about balance. And we're spending a substantial percentage of our beach fund in one place, And, if you ever want to see sand in front of your house, okay, we need to think about how we're shoveling it all into one wheelbarrow. And it's not, I don't think it's equitable.
Well,
If we continue to do that, it's not equitable.
Well, but again, that's all towards budget conversation. So I'm trying to keep this meeting on track as it relates to just the agenda items.
I think it's time that we slap the table and we say what we're gonna do, and we talk about if we're gonna raise taxes, we tell people how much. Some of these things that we're talking about, like occupancy tax increase, may not happen for a year.
Or two.
Yeah.
But
I
we
mean,
don't
it's
know
not-
that yet.
Well, I think we know it's gonna not happen before budget time.
But I still think that we're not being asked for a vote on the specific line item for Thursday. And I personally, and we can pull the board, but I'm not comfortable doing that until we get closer to budget time for a lot of the reasons that I had mentioned, but also what Alderman Grant had mentioned.
Won't there be a new board by the time budget time comes?
No,
No.
No.
Okay.
we'll start the budget here in a couple of months,
Yeah.
probably in
Oh,
March,
Yeah,
okay?
That's why.
I was just a
That's
little
why.
concerned.
No, that's
Do you guys have,
I get that this is a hard decision, but I think we need to move forward and start at least leaning into it a little bit more than we are right now. We seem to keep finding creative ways to kick this can down the road and not address it.
I don't think
And that's
that's
my
what we're,
concern.
I don't believe that that's what we're doing.
I
I
believe
think
that's
that what
exactly
we're,
what we're doing, Joanne.
I don't believe so. I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we make an educated decision on exactly what has to be done. And I think if they were your taxes that were getting raised, Tom, that you would like us as a board to have all of the information in front of us from a budget perspective so we can do our jobs the right way.
We are going to go to the LGC at a point in time soon, I would assume. And when we talk to the LGC, they're not going to care about what money we might be able to raise down the road from things like an increased occupancy tax or paid parking. They're going to want to see what revenues that we have the ability here and now to raise. Am I right or wrong?
That is correct. They will be
Okay.
interested. I would say this to the board. There are so many variables in this entire plan. We're speaking to revenue variables. We have to also understand that we really will not know the cost of this project until it is bid. We will not know the debt service on this project until the project is bid, Our share is determined, and they have told us what the interest rate is. So we're 2 or more years away from knowing what the debt service is. Now, all we can do as reasonable people, both as your consultants and you as the Board of Aldermen, is say, here is what we now know. We have looked at a financial plan that would cover with new revenues and without, because right now in that plan, which I presume is available for public review, we know what the absolute tax rates will be based on 16.5 million, X% interest rate when this project is supposed to start. And so I think that what the board will do by adopting this resolution is saying we have a plan with data as best we know today. And based upon that data we know today, here is what the revenue measures would be with and without 2 additional new revenues. Now, also, you as a board will be required to cover that debt service if the project size is greater and the interest rate is higher, or if that project cost is lower and the interest rate is lower. So all we can give them is the best we know now, with your understanding that you're going to soon, if you have not already, signed a contract with the Corps of Engineers entering into this agreement. So I think all of what is being said is true. I think we have a plan, it's multifaceted, but where the rubber meets the road, when you sign the debt service agreement with the Corps and have to make the debt service payments, you're going to have to raise whatever taxes are necessary to pay that.
That's the problem.
Okay.
In each individual budget, because each budget will appropriate the payment for debt service in that particular year. And so it's a somewhat lifelong process, because even after the first debt service is paid off in 7 years, you'll have renourishment costs. So I think your financial plan covers it. And I think by y'all voting to accept that financial plan, you've essentially recognized what the tax impacts will be if you do not have any new revenues.
My thought is that, one, you're correct. This is a 50-year, we're signing up for a 50-year project, and as soon as the debt service on the initial construction is paid off, we're going to be looking at a renourishment cycle. And so this never really goes away. But my thought is we've been approved for the project, it's been funded, we know it's coming, and rather than waiting until we have everything perfect in this whole thing, we probably ought to go ahead and slap the table and start putting away money now, even if it's going to be 3 or 4 years down the road before we see any sand or need to be making any payments. We'll have a little bit of money up front set aside rather than trying to do it all at once. And maybe when we do that, we could adjust that tax rate. We may have to adjust it, hopefully downward. Okay. But we just gotta come to grips with this thing.
Yes, sir.
2 comments. First, I do agree we need to start putting the money away starting July 1 for the federal project, because the more that we have on balance, the less our loan's going to be, so the smaller our interest is going to be over the construction period. So I think that's a no-brainer to me. The second comment is, last month we had a consensus that we were going to have municipal service districts as the primary way to raise tax revenue. And so I think that we just need to maybe reaffirm that with a vote on Thursday night, that we are considering, we're going to have multiple municipal service districts, and we've got version 6 from Carter and Associates with these 9 options, and we're going to be working through these 9 options as we work through the budget cycle, and we'll come down and narrow that down to one of those options when we finally approve the budget. So I think that's really where we should be on Thursday.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to, again, having us be able to review the resolution before the meeting, so we're all comfortable with the language. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and again, what I was talking about, what Mr. Benson said is, we gotta start putting money away. We can't live this life and we borrow everything that we do.
Right.
Well, We know it's coming.
But that's the point is,
So
but I think that Mr. Carter had talked about that before is, if we've got 3 years, 2.5 years from when we start our next budget, how much money can we put away and how much of the other loan can we do? That's going to affect dramatically what we're going to do. But also keeping in mind what Tom said, which is, okay, so the first one's over. All right. And I don't think we can be telling, this is my opinion, not the board's. I don't think we can be telling people that we're going to do away with this once this is paid off, because it's going to be a revolving door in terms of more money coming in.
And I don't think that's
And
the
you got
message
other
that we've
projects.
given. Yeah, I don't think that's the message that we've given. I personally, and again, this is my opinion, not a vote by the board, but if we start with the municipal service district there, I don't see how we're going to be able to place sand the whole rest of the beach unless we continue some type of municipal service district model up the beach. May be differing as you go based on what's needed and how many houses and all those things, but
Well, I think that every beach project that we do needs to be examined on a case-by-case basis. Because it'd be one thing if we didn't just put sand down there in phase 5 years ago. But the whole town paid for that. You've got no sand, you've got no sand. At what point in time, I don't know if we do the municipal service district model for every future project, or is it for every future federal project, or is it for every future project, the second one after the initial, or what? Because there's portions of this town that have never gotten any sand at all. And before we just say, well, everybody's going to pay as they go, maybe we look at some modified model to that, and we need to examine every potential project on its individual merits and on how it's going to be paid. I've paid sand, we've paid for sand down in phase 5. At some point in time, we need sand too.
yes, sir.
I was going to point out and support that 100%, because the other thing we've talked about it here is, just use one small example is, we're talking about the parking revenue being applied to this loan. I would bet that less than 5% of the parking revenue is coming from 5. All right,
That's
so
true.
when you're looking at MSDs, I think we have to look at every project on its own merits.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out what the town is, what's our debt position, because I'm not sure we'd be in the same place, my opinion, if we didn't have $15 million in debt in the same place. Okay, if there was no debt and this was the first beach project, we might be looking at it differently. I don't know. But again, to Tom's point, let's just step back from this and understand a couple of things. One is, we're going to have projects going forward, period. All right, where they hit, how we allocate revenue is something we're just going to have to look at as they hit. I think this is unique. 2 reasons. One's the size of it, and 2, the fact we've already got $15 million in debt in the same spot.
And do we really want to tie up all of our future proceeds from paid parking in this one area of town?
That's my point.
I mean, when you think about it, there's other areas of town. Look at the folks who live close to the 4x4 beach and what they put up with up and down New River Inlet Road. The payback ought to be, well, at least we're getting some paid parking revenue out of it, as these guys fly by my house at 40+ miles an hour after they've been up at the inlet all afternoon drinking adult beverages. I don't think it's a good precedence to move all that money there, or to say we're going to use all of it for this particular project. I do believe it should go into the beach fund, but from there, I'm not sure how.
And that's the point.
Well, and I think we might be able to, I'm sorry, Mike, did you have a?
I was just gonna add that for this coming budget cycle, we're talking about putting all the paid parking revenues into the federal project. But in future years, as we do the budget, we're gonna have to modify that, because we're going to have to put a proportion of that parking revenue into the next project beyond the federal project.
Right.
So it'll be a year-by-year decision on how we
Yep.
distribute those paid parking revenues.
And I don't think we need to dive down into our budget now, because that's,
Except that if we go to the LGC and pledge parking revenue to pay off this project, we might box ourselves into a corner, correct?
But I don't think
thought he
he's
said we're
gonna be
not gonna do
charging
that.
the total
Okay.
parking revenue.
Okay.
He said we're not, all it's gonna be is total revenue coming in. We're not gonna look
Alright.
and say it's going here. and here.
Because, you know, we pledged occupancy
We don't want
taxes
to do
against
15
phase
feet
5.
again.
And that's kind of where we are with the occupancy taxes right now. That we pledged them against a specific project for the LGC.
I think Mr. Carter's told us before not to do that again anyway.
Folks, just to clarify here, with respect to the core project, and you've heard this from Brian earlier, the LGC does not have to approve the core project. That is not in their approval purview. However, we have an agreement with the Local Government Commission that pledges all of the revenues that are currently dedicated to the beach activities of the town to pay off early the USDA loan. And so what we're doing by going to the Local Government Commission is saying we, through our resolution we're going to adopt, are confirming and acknowledge our agreement with you on the early payoff of the USDA loan. We are simultaneously letting you know that we have another financial plan with new revenues, which will implement a new beach project in phase 5. And here's how we intend to pay for that, so that you will understand that we're taking none of the revenues previously dedicated by our agreement to prepay the USDA loan are being used for another purpose. That's the
Right.
sole purpose for the resolution. That will be the sole purpose for the meeting. Technically, they do not approve your sources of funds for the core project. We're simply identifying for them how we're going to pay off this additional project, and we're not going to impair the revenues that are available for advanced retirement of USDA debt.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. We're ready.
Because we know, just to follow up on that, correct me if I'm wrong, but we know that if we don't go down that road, and we don't inform them, we don't play nice with them and keep them informed of what we're doing, and then the next time we go in for the project after next, you know, we may not get as favorable review as we did in the past two. Firehouse. Exactly.
All right, so what I was hoping we'd be able to do is move on and just have Mr. Grant kind of go through some of the educational material that he had pulled together for us, and just see if any board members have any questions as well.
Yeah, just real quick, I know people have looked through this, and it was just kind of doing a summary. The only thing I would say in here that's different is town council had looked at it, and when you look at the occupancy tax specific to North Topsail Beach, I've given everybody another handout which we can post. The legislation specifically says it has to be for specific uses, and they're very specific as to, you know, what those uses are. So, and it talks about it's got to be used for beach nourishment specifically. And I think that Alderman Leonard had made a good point before, and that is we need to know what revenues have to be applied to which areas, because that allows us or it makes us look at the other areas that we don't have restrictions on. You know, for example, very quickly is the 15 cents in property taxes, okay, that we pledged to the last project, when we don't really have to pledge property taxes to the beach fund. Certain things we do have to do, certain things we don't have to do. And in my opinion, I think it's a mistake in the future to specifically target something, to your point, Tom, for a project, when again, and to Mr. Benson's point, is we need to look at these projects independently. And if we start saying it has to go here, it has to go here, it has to go here, that's going to restrict everything that we do. So anyway, all this was supposed to do, and I think you can post it. I'll update. I have not updated, but I'll update with the statutory language and then recirculate it to everybody if that's okay.
The other thing I'm concerned about is obligating another board to a decision to use this mapping on every project. We really can't do that. So.
And I think the only thing I'm trying to say is if we institute municipal service districts, they are available to use as we move up the beach, but we do not have to use it in the exact same form or fashion that it's modeled in for phase 5.
Well, this isn't the first time we've done it. We actually had to, when we went to the LGC, they required that we had an MSD when we did the phase 1 project. We redug the inlet back in 2012. We didn't have to do anything with it beyond, establish tax rates within it, but we had to actually have a resolution and approve the establishment of a MSD. And I think we did the same thing when we did phase 5. And Doug would remember more than I. It doesn't necessarily bind you to raising taxes in there, but they required us to actually go through the process of identifying one.
Right.
Just real quick as a follow-up to that, Brian's not here, so he can, but the other thing he told us, we had a discussion in a previous meeting, is if you establish a tax for an MSD, it has to be per an agreement and those revenues used in that MSD.
Mhm.
And so, any project we would do going forward has got the same parameters on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if we did one in my area,
Mhm.
right, you'd have to, but then all the MSD revenues have to be applied to that. And that's, I think that's gonna be a little bit tricky in some of the
But
areas.
conversely, if we do a project in your area, I don't know, are you phase 3?
2, I think it's 2.
2 or 3?
We have a discussion whether I'm
Well,
2 or 3 about every year.
If you were to do one and say combine 2 and 3, which would be most logical to do because of their size, there's no necessity to establish a tax rate specific to that MSD. In other words, if we wanted to say the whole town's going to pay for this because you haven't ever had one yet, we could do that too.
Right.
It just have to come out of Fund 10 or the beach fund.
Right.
But which goes back to my earlier point and one that you've also made, Rick, is that each future project needs to be case by case basis, evaluated individually.
I agree.
Any questions? How you doing, Mr. Peters? You first?
I'm fine. In relative to what we're discussing now, how flexible or inflexible are those conditions associated with the MSD that once we lock into them?
Once we, at budget time, you talking about the actual tax rate? Well, I think what we've said is the one reason we are not comfortable selecting a tax rate today or Thursday is because of the ever-changing variables such as the cost of the project or the debt service of the project. So I think once we lock in at budget time, and Mr. Carter, you can probably do this better than I am, but once we lock in at budget time and have an improved budget, at that point is when I think we're locked in to the tax increase.
Yeah, but you could change it every year.
Oh, is that the question?
Yeah, you could change it
Every
every year.
year,
You could have it
okay.
be 5 cents, 1 cent, 9 cents. And I think it goes back to what Mike talked about is if we know the renourishment's gonna be nothing or the cost is lower, then we adjust it each year.
Okay,
Is that,
Isn't that what you
I'm
said?
sorry, I
That's what you said, Mike.
misunderstood your question.
You have
You're
to
good?
look at it every year.
That's right, that's what I said a minute ago.
that's what I was hoping to hear.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Parking.
Yep, so the only other thing here is the paid parking presentation. My only question is this a presentation that we're gonna be ready to talk about for the town-wide solution, or is this just replacement of the vendor or possible replacement of the vendor, or?
Well, the report that I sent out over the weekend, I was addressing it only from the selection of the vendor.
For town-wide use?
Yes,
Okay, good. Okay,
because it seemed to me that the revenues were going to be either worked out in the budget process or, as part of the financial plan. Well, what I would really like to get going on is since the plan would involve the use of smartphones and no kiosks and that sort of thing, is getting the information out on how people would sign up, residents, property owners who don't live here, how do they avoid having to pay for parking, that sort of thing. So the bigger jump we can get on that, the better, I think.
Yes.
I thought all you wanted us to do was acknowledge the fact that you're doing it.
Basically.
We don't have to sign. I mean, I assume from what you sent, you have the authority to do that.
he does.
You just want us to acknowledge the fact that you're gonna cancel the existing contract
Right.
and potentially go
And enter
through
a new contract.
Yeah, it's just it says just presentation. I just
That's
wanted to understand what we were,
That's perfect, because I think, Tom and I talked about before, we need to roll this thing out now.
Sooner rather than later.
Part to follow up on what Dave said too, it's not just to assist those that are residents and non-resident property owners with a smooth transition here, but it's also to get out in local media and to get the word out in the local area so that people can download the app before they try to come on the 1st of March and have to pay, that they can get the app downloaded and fill out the little thing that you got to fill out with your license number and all that stuff. Try to make it smooth for everybody so we don't have a big hiccup on rollout day.
Exactly.
And the only way we're going to do that is education and talking media and moving forward with the process.
So I've been getting a ton of questions about, what does that mean to the side street parking? So I don't know if we're going to be, if
Well, we're
we've
there.
gotten.
Dave's got it.
We're there.
Yeah, in the plan, we were gonna ban side street parking, except for the 3 areas I think that Deb identified were a little short.
In the phase 5 area,
No, it's
Yeah,
everywhere.
it's down in front.
everywhere.
I thought we decided it's going to be paid parking or no parking, and those are the 2 choices.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Right. No, I mean,
But he
I'm
said
talking
that
about
there,
townwide. Yeah,
no.
that's what he said.
Yeah.
no, what he just said was there
She said
are a
5.
few areas where we don't have enough parking spaces. So in
Right.
those
That's
areas.
5.
But there
That
were
was my
5.
question.
5.
There's only 3 side streets that we would be using.
But they're not a lot. My recollection is it's not that many.
He said 3.
And we'll identify them as parking areas.
So are you going to do away with current parking spaces on side streets that are already being traditionally used as parking? Is that what you're saying? No.
Generally, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would be inclined to do away with them. In many cases, we know that the property owners in many cases have taken over the right of ways with landscaping and big rocks and things like that. And, we could certainly run roughshod over them and say, we're gonna make parking everywhere that we have a right of way. I just don't think that's the best way to serve constituents.
Right.
But, one of the reasons I put it out there is if anybody disagrees or would rather do something else, we can do it.
Well, I personally, and I've been vocal about this, have never felt that the right of way equals a parking space. To me, a right of way has a different use than being a parking space. If it's going to be parking, it should be actually marked as parking and you don't feel like somebody's parking in your yard because you know that it's a parking space.
But I think, Dave, Surf City's doing the same thing.
Mhm.
It's either yes or no. It's parking or it's no parking. Okay, and
They have
they're
not,
creating some more, because otherwise the confusion gets into,
Yeah.
to Mike's point, I'm on a side street. Can I park here or not? And it means you have to put no parking signs or parking signs up on every single side street, on every, So anyway, I think our consensus from the committee was basically just yes or no.
To my knowledge, Surf City has not announced that they're doing anything, so, well, I agree. It would be great for us to roll out at the same time and to be consistent with rates and rules and regulations. I don't want to presume that they're going to do.
I'd prefer that we don't wait, but my understanding is they're investigating it as well. And I guess they'll get to it when they get to it, but I certainly don't want to wait for Surf City.
Right. They started ahead of us. Okay, I'm just saying that in theory, when the first presentation, we were being told they were here and we're here. Now I think we're talking about whether we've passed them or whatever, but I don't, to Tom's point,
Yeah.
The apps and everything else, putting them on our website, putting,
Yeah, let's
putting
get it
stuff
going.
up, putting on that little sign coming in, go to so-and-so to get your app.
Yes.
Yeah,
Aren't we part of, the last meeting, they talked about Jacksonville, urban,
Jumbo,
yes.
jumbo.
Do we have a representative? Are we supposed to vote for a representative or appoint a representative?
That's coming up. We just, had the contract signed and sent back to Jumbo. I got an email, from her last night. I've not read through it yet. But I'll give you an update on that as soon as I can.
Okay, well, I was just thinking that might be a place to disseminate the information about our parking. Because a lot of people come from Jacksonville.
Well, and the Daily News.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we our manager's probably gonna need to be interviewed by the Daily News and have his picture on the front page.
Better him than us.
And I also want to just say
Notice how I did
too,
that?
you all may have a different opinion, but I've been asked several times, when has the board decided we're moving forward with paid parking? And I believe that we have been doing that for months and months and months in these meetings. And we've also committed to it as a board as part of our financial model that we're agreeing to be able to raise the additional revenues.
Not that long ago, we did something in this room that directed Alderman Grant and myself to be a member
Yes,
of the parking committee with the manager. And but we did something specific. We took action to direct that.
we did.
And
I've just gotten
back
that
in
question a
November,
few
October,
times.
maybe.
So,
Yeah.
When our sign coming into town says spring.
yes.
So.
Does okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Just to be sure I'm clear on this, are we going to have some new public parking in areas where we don't currently have public parking to meet the requirements of the federal project?
Yes,
And have you figured out where the area is going to be?
yes, I've discussed those with the town manager.
Okay.
Yeah, there are 3 streets. I think it's 13th Avenue, Reeve Street, and one other.
It's in
It's in the report, yeah.
Okay.
But it is in the report, and actually, I believe on each of them, those areas are being used for parking now.
Right.
We would just be defining them and giving them a number so that when the person signs in, it would identify where they've paid for their parking.
Does the federal project really require actual parking, or does it just require public to be able to access the beach for a certain distance from the next public access place?
Can I
Because
answer that, Dave?
Go ahead, Dave.
There's a manual that they have, and I've included that in a correspondence with the town manager before. And what it says is that, there has to be a beach access every quarter mile and parking the definition of how they did the parking was, every half mile. And in that definition, the reasonable amount of parking spaces was interpreted to be 10 parking spaces. So, several years ago in our, Parks and Rec master plan that the Board of Aldermen adopted, one of the policy statements I believe that they also adopted is that they would try to establish parking as opportunities were available, every half mile, or it's a half-mile radius, so every mile for parking, and every half mile or quarter-mile radius for beach access.
Okay.
Okay. And so what we've proceeded along has been from guidance that we've received from the Army Corps of Engineers even prior to this past December when the project was announced that it was funded. This is something that we've been working on since like 2004.
Okay.
And I know I've seen the equipment out at the Jeffries lot. Is that to expand the parking there? That big
No,
machine?
At this point, we're not doing anything as far as expanding the size of the lots. We'd have to do a big major modification permit and a bunch of other things. And maybe we get it off the ground first, get some
Okay.
revenue numbers, and then reconsider whether we need to expand or want to expand.
Actually, that equipment, I think, is gonna find its way up to the north end.
Is that where that's
Dredge.
going? I was thinking it was to expand the parking, but okay.
And then we looked at in the course of doing some of the expansions at this time, seemed to run counter to what we were trying to do with revenue. And I know Scott went over it very carefully as far as having stone delivered and spread out. And there's a lot we would like to do, but I think we should see how it works.
Sure.
Don't think it wants to be.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any other questions regarding the agenda for Thursday?
I have an additional item.
What were you looking to add, Mr. Benson?
We have been talking about the need to replace the fire station. I've asked the town manager to have a meeting fairly soon with Alderman Grant, myself, and the chiefs and himself. so that we can at least say, yes, we want to move forward with replacing the South Fire Station, because I think we need to get it into this budget cycle. Because we don't, we're gonna be another year down the road before we talk about replacing it. So I would just like for us to maybe have a consensus on Thursday night to ask Mr. Carter to develop yet a financial plan for replacing the South Fire Station.
Do we have the numbers to be able to give them to Mr.
We'll
Carter?
have some rough numbers.
And that would be the town-wide tax.
So basically what we would be doing is on Thursday, we would just be directing staff to work with Mr. Carter and create a financial model for our capital needs. Okay. Any objection to adding that to the agenda?
If you and Mr. Grant can hang on a few minutes, since we'll shoot you here, let's firm up the meeting.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.